Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel's mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Today I will be continuing to look at the list of things Jim Palmer, a former megachurch pastor, says the religious establishment does not want you to know. Today we're looking at number 13. Jim Palmer writes, if your livelihood depends on the success of your church as an organization, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that you will most definitely define and reward Christianity as participation in church structures and programs. Christian living is mostly a decentralized reality or way of life, not a centralized or program-dependent phenomenon. Church attendance, tithing, membership, service, and devoted participation become the hallmarks of Christian maturity. Let's talk about what I think Mr. Palmer is driving at, and I am going to draw some points out of this. I'm not sure if I agree or disagree so much as I get what he's driving at, but as an anti-theist, I think I probably take a slightly harsher view of what he's driving at, because what he's saying is, okay, if the clergy's livelihood depends on the success of the church as an organization, then the clergy is going to push for behaviors, push for things that demonstrate Christian maturity that also connect to devotion to a particular church or organization or denomination or sect or whatever. Okay, so what's going to happen is that the clergy is going to create a system of rewards, perhaps even punishments, where participation in the church is encouraged and looked at as a hallmark of Christian maturity. That way, people begin to measure their Christian maturity based on how well they participate in the church. So what's going to happen is you're going to have this reinforcement of ideas that lead to the success of a church as an organization, and you're going to tap into people's sense of wanting to be a better person, wanting to be more mature, and you're going to start labeling certain things as hallmarks of Christian maturity so that those things will be actively, encouraged within the church ranks. And what happens is devotion to God gets conflated with devotion to the church as demonstrating devotion to God. In other words, all of these things, you want people to feel like they're being devoted to God and devoted to their Christian way of life or whatever religion it is. So you encourage behavior that supports the religion as an organization, supports the church. I know Christianity the best, but the idea a lot of times with what we did in the church was to increase attendance, devotion, tithing, things like that, and then tell people that this demonstrated their growth in Christian maturity. So like a person that came every Sunday but didn't drop anything into the offering plate, well, they're at a certain level of maturity. When they get more mature, they'll tithe. They come to this program, but they don't come to that program. When they get more mature, they'll come to the more deeper programs, the things that move them on. And so the idea is if you're going to mature in Christ, if you're going to mature in your religion, then what we're going to do is we're going to conflate that and make that wrapped up in devotion to God, that you want to show and demonstrate your devotion to God, then come to church more often, give more money, participate in the activities of the church, all those sort of things. And so this becomes conflated. Devotion to God and devotion to the church become conflated. So what you end up having is a reinforcement of behaviors. So things like attendance, we want you there all the time. Success of any organization, particularly volunteer organizations, is that volunteers and people show up to be there. Tithing, you can't do anything without money. And so tithing and offerings in any religious organization become a part of it, because we're going to say, hey, you're learning how to depend more on Christ. You're learning how to depend less and less on yourself and give to God what belongs to Him, sort of thing. And when you reach this certain level of maturity, you'll learn to give more and more and more. The faith preachers tap into this quite a bit. but almost all religious organizations in some way, shape, or form have some sort of idea of devoted giving. Membership, moving deeper into Christ means becoming a member of the church and moving deeper into that. Service, serving Christ, coming into the church and, cleaning things up, or becoming a Sunday school teacher, or, doing some of the other works of the ministry. All of a sudden, all that becomes part of your service to God, and thus it also helps the church because it's service to the church. And then you become more devoted, say, into services. You come to church service every week. You go to prayer meeting. You go to Bible studies. You go to Sunday school. You go to all the things. And all of that is listed as a hallmark of maturity. Now, if you think about it, some of us that grew up in the church, when we went to Sunday school, how many times did you have that chart on the wall when you were a kid going to Sunday school where it said attendance, offering, knew the Bible verse, paid attention during the lesson, and the teacher would give you rewards for all these things. But do any of those things actually make us a better human being? Okay? Do these make us a more loving person? Do they make us a better person? Do we wake up with the idea of, I want to be a better person than I was yesterday because of these ideas? You might catch some of that in the teaching of the church or whatever, but you may not necessarily. It becomes the fact that attendance, offering, bringing your Bible, doing the things that everybody expects you to do as a Christian becomes the marks of your maturity, instead of becoming a more peaceful person or becoming a more kind person, or, your human maturity isn't necessarily wrapped up in all the activities of the church. But the church, and this is where you're seeing behind the religious curtain, is dedicated to success as an organization. And so it's going to push the things that make it dedicated to successful organization, not necessarily what will lead you into being a better human being. And, maybe a Bible study might help you become a better human being. I doubt it. I think, you can become a better human being without it, but, and probably even a better human being because you're not allowing religion to prejudice your thinking about what it means to be a better human being. So you begin to move into these circles of trying to be a better human being. So what does all this stuff do? It's more about being led to being a well-regulated human being as far as your behavior. But as far as you are as a person growing and maturing as a human being, that's not what it's about. It's about control. It's a control mechanism. And so what you see behind the religious curtain is that they are not interested in making you a better human being so much as they are making you a well-regulated human being whose behavior is ordered by the organization, or in the case of Christianity, is ordered by the church. And usually it's a very local body phenomenon. And this one kind of hits at home because when I left the church, I became very concerned not with being involved with a religious organization anymore, or attending a church, giving money to a church. As a pastor, I was always creating activities to get people involved. I didn't care about that anymore. Just dumping all that stuff. And I began to realize, okay, how can I be a better human being? And this is kind of where my initial interest in the 9 Noble Virtues and several other philosophies of life, including Stoicism, began, because I was looking for something that made me look at myself a lot more, look myself in the mirror anymore, that didn't have anything to do with that religious devotion. And when you're a minister, of course, you have to be the example of religious devotion. So, I had to be there every Sunday. I gave to the church as an example to others. I was at every service or activity, whether I actually worked at that service activity or not, because I had to be an example of how you could be at everything and do everything. And when I left the church, all that went away. I was more concerned about being a better human being, about being a better version of myself the next day than I was the day before. And then, having a moral code based on rationality and an understanding of the way human beings and society works, moving into a worldview that dealt with that reality far better. All of these things were aimed at my maturity as a human being and not as my well-regulated behavior that pleased the church. And this is the biggest change for me when I was deconverting. And I think many of you out there, this is your struggle. This is the thing that you deal with, is now that you no longer believe, okay, what do you devote yourself to? You're not going to be devoted to God. You sure as hell shouldn't be devoted to this religious organization that basically has indoctrinated you into well-regulated behavior and well-regulated thoughts so that you can be controlled by them. So when the preacher preaches something, you eat it up, okay, because that's what you've been taught to do, okay, and now you don't have that. So instead, now you're free to pursue what you want to pursue as far as what do you want to be as a human being? What do you want to be better? What virtues are you going to go after? And I think delving into something like Stoicism or the Nine Noble Virtues and thinking about them, or going on the route of, okay, how do I have better character? Okay, how do I have better action that lines up with that character? That's maturity as a human being. I mean, you can attend an organization all you want, give money to it, and it doesn't make you a better human being. So that's the change for us that are deconverting. For me, it became much more of a pursuit of living a philosophy, living a certain way of doing things to change me as a person. And then, of course, there's also the fact that you run into obstacles. Like in my case, I couldn't understand why I kept continuing to have certain problems. And then, I went off to Texas, and those problems became more acute because of the change in environment. When I came back, of course, I sat down with my therapist and realized that the real world problem that the church could never deal with, that the church could never help me get over or get around or figure out how to use to my advantage, became my hypersensitivity and my autism. Once those were diagnosed, once those were looked at, once I began to get suggestions from other people and my therapist and figure those things out, I suddenly began to regulate my emotions a lot better. Something I could never do in the church with this idea of just giving it all to God. Because that's the other thing about, human maturity, is one of the things that religious devotions, such as disciplines like prayer and, fasting and all, what does that actually teach you to do other than to be more devoted to the church? Does any of that stuff really teach you to be a better human being? Oh, maybe service to your fellow man might do that. I've done a series on that where I went through the spiritual disciplines and, looked at all that stuff. So, what do you do at that point? Where are you at? And I think you begin to realize that it takes other things, actual interaction with human beings, where you change the way you do that, learning how to overcome some of your uniqueness that might be both a help and a hindrance to what you want to be as a human being. And you suddenly find yourself, needing a community that is more concerned about human maturity than whether they get your money, okay, or they get your time. I remember I used to preach it all the time. You got to give your time, talent, and treasure. That's why I end my videos with don't, take your time, your money, your opportunities, and give them to yourself instead of giving them to an organization. This is a very key element to my feelings of how deconversion and, deconstruction and reconstruction go. You deconstruct this behavior-induced indoctrination. You get rid of all that, and then you go more to a character-building way of life and philosophy of life instead. And that's the change. That's the shift. And so I think Jim Palmer's onto something here. And I think that's him being very profound. And when you see behind the religious curtain that this is about creating well-regulated, religious devotees that are indoctrinated to serve and indoctrinated to submit and be controlled. Once you realize that that's what the organization is about, and you have to watch that with other organizations, not necessarily religious ones, but once you realize that's what the organization is about, you head for the door. You can't unsee that. Okay, my problem now, I get a kind of minor form of PTSD every time I walk into a church, and I've only done it like 2 or 3 times since I left the faith. And because it just brings up so many memories, of stuff and thoughts and things, and my time as a minister, and there are some things that I don't want to remember, and other things I don't, are pretty neutral about. But I can't unsee it now, because when I look at, I walk into a church and they have a mission statement on the wall, and you see, they post the offering and attendance figures, and they do, they have all their programs and stuff in the foyer, and and I'm looking at it and looking at the organization and asking the question: does any of this lead to people being actually better human beings? And I end up wrestling with that the entire time I'm inside of a church building. So, that's kind of where I've moved away from it. So that's kind of where I stand. I think that needs to be an important revelation when you're deconverting, that the church was never about your personal benefit and maturity. It was always about them gaining some benefit from you. And once you figure that out, the game's over for as far as participating in a church, in my opinion. But there you go. So that's this one for this one. We only have one more part to go, so we'll see what happens there. But thanks once again for everybody stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, my PayPal link is usually in the description of every video. There's also Super Chat, Super Thanks. Those are always well appreciated. Thank you very much for those of you that give that way. And, of course, the best way to support the channel is become a member of the channel, become a citizen of the Rabyd Nation. That allows me to feel a little bit more comfortable doing videos like this in particular, where I talk about deconversion more centrally. And so thank you for all that. I appreciate it. But becoming a member is the best way to support the channel, because that monthly support, I focus more on what benefits you and less on what benefits the YouTube algorithm every member I get. So thank you very much for that. So to my citizens, to my Rabyd citizens, to my tribunes, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And, you guys are awesome. So thank you for your support. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So you might as well spend all your time, your money, your opportunities on yourself, on the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.